Halloween is just around the corner, so let's talk about something that scares us and makes us feel a little bit uncomfortable, or at least makes me feel uncomfortable: death. Hey everyone, I'm Donna and you're watching Wanted Adventure Living Abroad. In 2 days, it will be Halloween, a holiday during which millions of people in the US and more people in other parts of the world dress up in scary costumes. Some people, as I explained in last year's Halloween video, dress up in funny or sexy costumes too, but the holiday itself is in general still about the celebration of things that haunt and terrify us. One of those things being death. Death is something that we often try to avoid talking about the whole rest of the year and then kind of let ourselves go crazy with on certain days. For example, Halloween in the US. So in honor of Halloween, I thought that I would make a video talking exactly about that very uncomfortable and terrifying topic. Because while death is something that we all have to face, it is handled differently in some ways in Germany and the US. For one, because death makes us feel uncomfortable, in both cultures, we have a lot of euphemisms for death. In fact, I could probably spend a whole video just talking about sayings related to death, but I'll just mention a couple of them here. In English, some idioms for to die include pass away, which is a polite way of saying it, as well as some more crude sayings like to bite the dust and to kick the bucket. In German, there's actually a similar saying to bite the dust, except instead of dust in German, it's grass. Ins Gras beißen. And a polite way of saying it that's kind of like to pass away in German is von uns gegangen, which literally means went from us. Another more crude way of putting it in German is abkratzen, which basically means something like in English to croak. And then in German, there's also den Löffel abgeben, which literally means in English to give up the spoon. And in English, I also know of 2 idioms that describe a person actually being dead: 6 feet under and pushing up daisies. And speaking of pushing up daisies, as far as I could find, in the US, when you purchase a cemetery plot, you're basically paying for that plot for forever. Of course, at some point in the future, it could happen that that land starts being used for something else, but the general idea is that you are buying the cemetery plot for forever. So for the foreseeable future, forever. Whereas in Germany, that's not the case. In Germany, the cemetery plots are actually rented. Exactly how long the rental period is differs around the country, but it's often around 20 to 30 years. And for some graves, after that time, the family can renew the rental, but for some types of graves, they can't. For some types of graves, that's it. You just get the one rental period. And one difference that I've noticed as far as the cemeteries go is that in the US, from my experience and from what I've seen on American TV shows and in movies, because, that's a great place to get the most accurate information, movies and TV shows. But yeah, from what I've seen, it seems like in the US, people often visit the grave of a loved one on a special day of the year. For example, maybe an anniversary. And then they often bring a bouquet of flowers to lay on the gravestone. Whereas in Germany, I've seen people visiting the grave or graves of their family members every week. They go there, put out new candles, they light the candles, they place new flowers on the grave, and they clear away any leaves that have fallen on the grave. They pick out the weeds that have grown there, really tidying up the grave or graves on a pretty regular basis. Something else that I have heard of and have seen happen here in Germany that I personally haven't ever seen or heard of happening in the US is that sometimes in Germany, when a person dies at home, instead of the deceased being picked up right away, the body is kept in the home and friends and family can come over and say their final goodbyes, gather around together and cry, tell stories, and then later on in the evening, the deceased is picked up and taken to a funeral home in a hearse. Like I said, I don't have any experience with that happening in the US, and I don't really recall ever seeing it in any American movies or TV shows or hearing about that from my friends or anything like that. I think that usually the deceased is picked up right away, but I would love to hear about your experience with it down in the comments. Thank you. Also, while in the US, cremation, I would say, is a pretty common thing, in Germany, the option of cremation is still a relatively new one. And up until rather recently, even if someone was cremated in Germany, those ashes still had to be buried. Whereas now, from what I could find, Germany has started to allow the possibility of ashes, for example, being strewn in a cemetery rather than being buried or brought out to sea beyond the 3-mile limit. But that's it. Unlike in the US, where many families keep the ashes at home in an urn, which is sometimes put up and displayed in the living room. And as far as funerals go, in both the US and Germany, black is the traditional color worn for mourning. And in Germany, after the funeral, it's a common tradition for the family of the deceased to provide what is called Beerdigungskuchen, literally funeral cake. So my question for you is, what are your thoughts on this topic, and how are things surrounding death done differently in other places? Please let me know in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching. I really hope that you enjoyed this video about a little bit more of a creepy topic this time. And also a really big thank you so much to our patrons on Patreon who help make these videos possible. Thank you so much for your support. If you would like to check out our Patreon page, you can find a link to that down in the description box below. Until next time, auf Wiedersehen. Yeah, but I laugh when I am talking about topics that make me nervous. I start to laugh, and then people are like, this isn't funny. And I'm like, no, I don't think it's funny. I'm just nervous.